What if I told you the most effective way to get someone to do what you want is to suggest they do the exact opposite? It sounds counterintuitive, but it's actually one of the most potent psychological tools in history, one even the ancient Stoics relied on. Today, we're breaking down a near universal mistake that 99% of people make when trying to persuade others. We're also going to explore how reverse psychology, rooted in Stoic wisdom, can completely transform your life. Most of us try to force our way through obstacles using direct requests and endless arguments, but that is a fast track to frustration. Stay with me until the end of this video, and you'll discover more than just a psychological trick. You'll learn a philosophy that gives you control in situations where you once felt completely powerless. You'll finally understand why the ancient sages believed that to get what you want, you first have to let it go. Let's start with the basics. We live in a world where everyone is trying to influence everyone else. Parents with their children, bosses with their employees, and marketers with their customers. Our default setting is almost always direct persuasion. We try to use logic, we appeal to a person's conscience, we beg, we negotiate, and sometimes we demand. But why does this fail so often? The answer lies in a phenomenon called psychological reactance. The moment someone feels their freedom of choice is being threatened, they instinctively push back. The harder you press, the more they resist. It's a mental defense mechanism that screams, "I'm the one in charge here." This is where the Stoics come in. Great minds like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus were masters of human nature. They understood that the only person we can truly control is ourselves. Instead of trying to break someone else's will, they learned to work with it, much like a judo master uses an opponent's own momentum to win the fight. The single biggest mistake we make is believing in the power of direct pressure. We assume that if we're persistent enough, or if we just lay out our case more forcefully, the other person will eventually cave. We gather our facts, build our logical arguments, and maybe even raise our voices. We think we're having a rational discussion, but what we're actually doing is declaring war on the other person's autonomy. Think of it like pushing a massive boulder. The harder you push against it, the more it resists you. Human willpower works the same way. Direct pressure is almost always perceived as an attack, an attempt to strip away someone's right to their own opinion. Instead of winning them over, you hit a wall of stubbornness and resentment. And here's the most frustrating part. They might actually agree with your points deep down. But the mere fact that they feel pressured will force them to defend the opposite side, simply to protect their own independence. Let's look at a classic scenario. A parent and a teenager. The parent says, "You have to study math more, or you'll fail your exams and have no future." To the parent, this sounds perfectly logical and caring, but what does the teenager actually hear? They hear, "You're incompetent. You don't know what's best for you. I know better. Just do as you're told." Their sense of autonomy is under attack. So how do they respond? They start to hate math even more. They might even go out of their way to sabotage their own future, just to prove they are still in control of their own life. The parent is now caught in a trap. The harder they push, the stronger the resistance becomes. They double down, imposing punishments and stripping away privileges. But this only reinforces the teenager's fight for independence. Ultimately, everyone loses. The parent doesn't get the result they wanted. The teenager's grades suffer, and the relationship is left in ruins. It's a clear example of how good intentions, when forced through direct pressure, can lead to a complete disaster. The same dynamic plays out in our personal relationships. Imagine one partner saying, "We need to spend more time together. You don't pay attention to me anymore." It sounds like a reasonable request, doesn't it? But to the other person, it can feel like an attack. What they actually hear is, "You're a bad partner. You're failing me. You need to change." This immediately puts them on the defensive. Instead of feeling inspired to connect, they start making excuses, arguing, or quietly pulling away even further. That's because quality time is no longer about joy. It has become an obligation fueled by guilt. You can't force someone to give you their love or attention. These are gifts that must be given freely. The moment they become a demand or a transaction, they lose their value. In a cruel irony, by trying to force a partner to be closer, we only push them away, widening the gap, exactly where we were trying to build a bridge. Now let's take a look under the hood. Why do we push back so hard when someone tries to change our minds? This phenomenon is known as psychological reactance. It was first identified by psychologist Jack Brame back in the 1960s, and the core idea is simple. Humans value their freedom. When we feel that our freedom of choice is being threatened, we have an immediate, powerful urge to reclaim it. And the easiest way to do that? Do the exact opposite of what we're being told. This isn't a logical choice. It's an emotional, almost primal reflex. It's actually hardwired into us by evolution. For our ancestors, the ability to make independent decisions was a matter of survival. So, whenever you tell someone, you must, or you have to, you're pushing a very old, very sensitive button in their brain. That button triggers an internal alarm. Warning! Threat to autonomy! Suddenly, all your rational arguments are drowned out by the sound of that siren. The person stops listening to your logic. They're too busy fighting for their freedom. All right, we get it. Direct pressure doesn't work. So what's the alternative? It's reverse psychology. But let's be clear. Reverse psychology isn't just telling someone, don't do it, and hoping they will. It's a much more subtle art. It's a strategy where you create the right conditions so that the other person arrives at the conclusion you want, fully convinced it was their own idea. This isn't about manipulation. It's about understanding human nature. Stop trying to push the ball forward. Instead, start subtly reshaping the landscape so the ball rolls in the right direction on its own. Instead of challenging their freedom of choice, you reinforce it. You let them feel in control. And that's the moment they drop their guard and become open to new ideas, including the ones you want to share. So how does this actually work in practice? The key is giving someone the freedom to choose, and even encouraging them to disagree with you. Let's go back to that example of a teenager and their math homework. Instead of saying, you have to study math, a parent might try saying, you know, I've been thinking, maybe math just isn't your thing. It's a tough subject, and it's not for everyone. It might be better to just focus on what you're already good at. Either way, it's your call. I'll support whatever you decide. Now, what's happening in that teenager's head? Suddenly, the threat to their freedom is gone. No one is pushing them anymore. In fact, they've been given total control. And just like that, their reason to resist evaporates. Now they can look at the situation objectively, without the drama. They might start thinking, wait, is it really that I can't do it? Or was I just pushing back because I felt forced? Maybe I should prove that I actually can handle it. By removing the external pressure, you've cleared the way for their own ego to take over. Now, their drive to act comes from within, from a personal desire to prove their own competence. Let's clear up a common misconception. Many people view reverse psychology as a form of manipulation. And to be honest, it can be, if your intentions are selfish. If you're using these techniques to trick someone into doing something that only benefits you at their expense, that is manipulation. But if your goal is to help someone make a choice that's truly in their best interest, a choice they're only resisting because of fear or stubbornness, then you're practicing the art of persuasion and wise mentorship. The difference lies entirely in your intent. The Stoics would never use their understanding of the human mind to deceive or cause harm. Their entire philosophy was built on virtue. So, whenever you use these methods, ask yourself, am I acting in this person's best interest or just my own? If you want your child to study because it will open doors for their future, your intent is pure. If you want to spend more time with your partner because you value them and want to grow closer, your motive is sincere. In the end, sincerity is the only thing that keeps influence from crossing the line into manipulation. Where exactly do we draw that fine ethical line? It all comes down to respecting a person's autonomy. Manipulation seeks to strip away choice, often through hidden tactics. Wise influence, on the other hand, does the exact opposite. It broadens a person's perspective so they can make a more informed decision. When you use reverse psychology ethically, you aren't forcing anyone. You're simply offering an alternative viewpoint. You're saying, I could be wrong, but look at it from this angle. You are giving them the right to disagree. In any dialogue, that freedom is the most valuable thing you can offer. The paradox is this: as soon as someone feels free to say no, they become much more willing to say yes. That's because their yes is finally their own, not something forced upon them from the outside. So, always leave them a way out. Never back someone into a corner. True persuasion isn't about pressure. It's about a light touch and the absence of coercion. A person should always reach the conclusion on their own. Your job is simply to light the path. Now let's tie this back to Stoic philosophy. It's incredible how they figured this out 2,000 years ago. At the heart of their teaching is what we call the dichotomy of control. As Epictetus famously put it, some things are within our power, while others are not. We have control over our thoughts, our judgments, and our own actions. We do not have control over the opinions of others, their choices, their emotions, or external events. The mistake we've been discussing, applying direct pressure, is a futile attempt to control the one thing we can't, another person's will. A Stoic understands that this is a waste of energy that only leads to frustration. Instead, they focus entirely on what they can influence, their own words and their own behaviour. They don't try to force someone to act. Instead, they adapt their own approach to create the best possible conditions for the desired outcome. They don't try to push the river, they reshape the riverbed. It's a fundamental shift in mindset, one that eliminates anxiety and gives you real, lasting power over the situation. One of the most powerful Stoic tools, and one that fits perfectly with reverse psychology, is Premeditatio Malorum, or the premeditation of evils. In the classical sense, it's the practice of visualizing worst-case scenarios to build mental resilience and strip away fear. Seneca famously suggested mentally rehearsing poverty, exile, or illness every single day. But this same tool can be used to influence others. How? By being the first to voice the potential difficulties and downsides. Instead of overselling your idea, you do the opposite. You highlight its flaws. You essentially warn the person. For example, if you're pitching a new project to a colleague, don't say, "This is a great opportunity for you." Instead, try something like, "Look, there's a project coming up, but honestly, it's a grind. The workload is heavy, the deadlines are tight, and there's no guarantee it'll even work. It might be more stress than it's worth for you." By doing this, you neutralize their objections before they even have them and strike a chord with their ambition. You aren't trying to convince them. You're creating a challenge that they'll want to prove they can handle. Let's look at another way to use the Stoic practice of premeditating hardships. Imagine you're trying to convince a friend to start working out. Instead of the usual, "Hey, come to the gym with me. It's great for your health and you'll feel amazing," try taking a Stoic approach. You might say, "Look, I've been hitting the gym lately, but honestly, it's brutal. Waking up early, being constantly sore, having no free time. For the first few months, you don't even see results. You just feel exhausted. It's definitely not for everyone. It takes a serious amount of willpower." What are you doing here? You're painting a realistic picture of the difficulties ahead. You aren't promising quick wins, and that builds immediate trust. Your friend realizes you aren't just trying to sell him on something, but at the same time, you're subtly challenging his pride. He starts thinking, "Wait, do I not have that kind of willpower? If he can do it, am I really too weak to try?" You aren't dragging him behind you. Instead, you're setting a bar that he'll want to clear himself. You've successfully turned a boring chore into a personal challenge. Another core principle of Stoicism is the idea that the obstacle is the way. Marcus Aurelius famously wrote, What stands in the way becomes the way. To a Stoic, an obstacle isn't a problem. It's an opportunity to practice virtue, whether that's courage, patience, or wisdom. So how does this relate to our topic? When someone resists you, when they're stubborn, or just say no, that is your obstacle. Most people try to force their way through it, bypass it, or crush it. But a Stoic harnesses that energy. When someone tells you no, they are exerting force. Instead of fighting that force, you redirect it. You agree with them. You say, "You're right. This actually is a bad idea. I'm glad you pointed out those flaws." You aren't arguing. You're accepting their resistance. It's completely disarming. They're bracing for a fight, but you offer peace. In that moment, because their resistance meets no wall to push against, it starts to work against their own logic. They might even start looking for the positives in the very idea they just rejected, simply to bring the conversation back into balance. The third pillar of Stoicism for mastering reverse psychology is amor fati, or the love of fate. This is the practice of embracing everything that happens as necessary, and even good. It's not about passive resignation. It's about an active, radical acceptance of reality. So how does this relate to persuasion? It's a game changer. When you want something too badly from someone else, you become a prisoner to their decision. That dependency is felt instantly on a non-verbal level. Your tension, your anxiety, and your persistence all scream one thing: neediness. And neediness is a total turn-off. People instinctively pull away from those who seem desperate. A Stoic, however, is internally prepared for any outcome. They might propose an idea, but if they're met with a no, they accept it as a natural part of the process. They don't get frustrated, they don't get angry, and they never beg. This inner independence and quiet confidence are incredibly magnetic. Because a Stoic needs nothing, people naturally want to give them everything. This Stoic composure is your greatest asset. Picture two different scenarios. In the first, someone is trying to sell you on an idea with intense eyes and wild gestures. They're speaking fast, getting emotional, and throwing a dozen arguments at you all at once. How does that make you feel? Most likely, you feel pressured. You want to pull away. Now consider the second scenario. Someone calmly and coolly presents an idea, almost with indifference. They end by saying, "Anyway, it's up to you. It doesn't really matter to me either way." Which person do you trust more? Which one actually sparks your interest? It's almost always the second one. Emotional detachment signals a lack of desperation. It makes the speaker seem objective, as if they have no hidden agenda. That kind of composure is contagious. It allows us to lower our guard and actually listen without feeling defensive. The Stoics mastered this state through mental discipline. They learned to separate external events from their own internal judgments. To them, a no is just a no. It's not a disaster, and it's certainly not a personal insult. This superpower is exactly what makes them masters of influence. Now let's dive into the specific tactics based on these principles. The first, and perhaps most famous, is the forbidden fruit effect. Human psychology is hardwired to value things that are rare, restricted, or hard to get. If something feels out of reach, we instinctively want it even more. Marketers exploit this constantly with phrases like limited edition, members only, or offer ends today. You can use this same logic in your everyday communication. Instead of pushing your ideas onto others, try presenting them as something exclusive, or even off-limits. For example, if you want a child to read a certain book, don't say, "Read this, it's good for you." Instead, try, "Actually, you're probably not ready for this one yet. It's for older kids." This instantly makes the book more valuable in their eyes. They'll want to prove they've grown up enough to handle it. You aren't forcing them, you're creating intrigue and a sense of scarcity. It's like saying, "Here is a treasure, but it might not be for you." That is far more powerful than any amount of persuasion. Another powerful tactic is creating the illusion of choice. People love to feel in control. When you offer options, Even if both lead to your desired outcome, people feel empowered and are much more likely to cooperate. This is a classic technique used with children. Instead of saying, "Go brush your teeth," you might ask, "Do you want to use the blue toothbrush or the red one?" The child focuses on picking a colour, and the actual requirement of brushing their teeth becomes secondary. They feel like they've made their own decision, and off they go to the bathroom without a fight. The exact same logic works on adults. Instead of asking a colleague, "Can you help me with this report?" try asking, "When would be better for us to look over the report? This afternoon or tomorrow morning?" Notice that never isn't an option. You've shifted the conversation directly to the logistics, assuming the agreement has already been made. It's a subtle, yet incredibly effective way to steer someone toward a decision while letting them keep their sense of agency. Let's see how this plays out in a real-world work environment. Imagine you need a team member to take on a difficult, rather unpleasant task. A direct command like, "Just get it done," will almost certainly spark resistance. Instead, try a Stoic approach. You call them in and say, "John, we've got a tough situation here. To be honest, the work is tedious and pretty thankless. I thought about asking Mark, but I'm just not sure he can handle this level of responsibility. I immediately thought of you, but I completely understand if you need to pass. I know how much you already have on your plate. This is a serious challenge." What did you just do? First, you applied Premeditatio Malorum by being upfront about how difficult the task is. Second, you challenged his professional pride by comparing him to a colleague. And finally, you gave him total autonomy by emphasizing his right to refuse. 9 times out of 10, John will want to prove his competence and say, No, I can handle it. Leave it to me." The same principle applies to friendships. Imagine you're dying to see a niche, art house film, but you know your friends usually prefer big-budget blockbusters. If you push them and say, "We have to see this, it's a masterpiece," they'll likely shut you down. Try a different angle instead. You tell them, "Hey, there's this really strange movie playing. The critics love it, but honestly, I'm pretty sure you guys would find it boring and way too long. It's definitely not for everyone. We should probably just stick to the usual action flick instead." By downplaying your choice and anticipating a negative reaction, you remove all the pressure. But at the same time, you're creating a sense of intrigue. They start thinking, "What kind of movie is so exclusive? Maybe we actually are the kind of people who would get it." You're playing to their desire to feel special, to feel like they aren't just like everyone else. And there's a good chance they'll be the ones to suggest, "Actually, let's take a risk. Let's go see that weird movie." Here's the fascinating part. Reverse psychology isn't just for influencing others. It's actually a powerful tool to use on yourself. Our brains are hardwired to resist pressure. When we tell ourselves, "I have to go on a diet," or "I need to start running every morning," we create an internal tension that almost always leads to self-sabotage. We start procrastinating and making excuses before we've even begun. Instead, try outsmarting your own mind. Tell yourself, "Okay, starting Monday, I'm giving myself total permission not to run for the entire week. But if I happen to feel an uncontrollable urge to go for a jog, then fine. I'll allow it." Or try this. "I'm not going on a diet. That's too much work. I'll just have a salad for dinner tonight instead of pizza, purely as an experiment. If I don't like it, I'll go right back to ordering pizza tomorrow." By stripping away those rigid rules and obligations, you bypass that natural internal resistance. You're turning a chore into a low-stakes game or a simple experiment. It makes the path to your goals feel light and actually enjoyable. The Stoics would call this the art of managing your own impressions. In conclusion, we must address both the ultimate risk and the ultimate reward of this approach. The risk is simple. Reverse psychology is not a silver bullet. Sometimes people will take you at your word and choose the very path you were trying to steer them away from. If you tell a teenager that math just isn't their thing, they might happily agree and walk away from it forever. That is why, when using this technique, You must be mentally prepared for any outcome, just like a true Stoic, and that is exactly where the reward lies. This approach teaches you to let go of the illusion that you can control others. It forces you to respect their autonomy, regardless of what they choose. You stop acting like a puppeteer and start acting like a wise gardener. A gardener doesn't tug on a plant to make it grow faster. Instead, you focus on creating the best possible environment, tilling the soil, watering it, and providing light. But whether that plant ultimately chooses to bloom is up to the plant. Embracing that freedom in others is the essence of true wisdom and strength. To sum it all up, the biggest mistake we make in communication is trying to bulldoze our way through someone else's will. We push, we argue, we try to convince, and all we get in return is more resistance. Stoicism and the reverse psychology rooted in its principles offer a completely different path. It's not about kicking down a locked door. It's about handing someone the key and letting them open it themselves. This is a fundamental shift from conflict to strategy, from raw pressure to genuine influence. Once you embrace this, you stop wasting your energy on pointless arguments. Your relationships grow deeper because they're built on a foundation of respect for the other person's autonomy. And suddenly, your goals seem to achieve themselves, simply because people actually want to help you. Remember, true power isn't about coercion, it's about inspiration. Sometimes the most effective thing you can do is let go of the reins and trust in the wisdom of human nature. Thanks for watching until the end. If this gave you something to think about, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss our future lessons. And I have a question for you. In what situations do you run into the most resistance or stubbornness? Share your story in the comments below. Let's talk about it.